And we are live. I had the sound turned off, and Brooke was like, make sure you don't say that, oh, we kind of messed up at the beginning. And it happened to happen anyway.
It didn't have to happen because I said don't do that.
The sound was off. But anyway, we're back, people. I am Terrell Harris, and this is my lovely wife.
I thought you were going to introduce me. Brooke Harris, hi.
And we're from theopenbox.com. What we decided to do today, or what we wanted to discuss, is the big thing that's going on around, and that's the Donald Sterling issue in regards to racism, his lifetime ban, and some of our thoughts and ideas that have been transpiring over the past couple of days. So, what do you want to say? Do you think he got what he deserved with this lifetime ban? Do you think anything else should have happened? Like, what are your feelings and emotions towards this particular event?
I think it's fine that he got banned. I'd like to know what the players' influence was, in terms of that. I think there's talk that there was some, potentially. I think doing things like wearing black socks and a band around your arm does nothing. It's a symbol. But when you come into contact with people who are racist, you actually have to do something. And yeah, so I think, they banned him. Okay, that's fine. However, he has a history of racism. So to ban him now because the whole country knows about it versus the city knowing about it and people he works with, other NBA coaches and, commissioners and all these other people, whatever, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just salacious and let's do something now. It's like when Paula Deen got into her trouble. Oh, well, let's do something now. But people know this already. People know that certain people have histories of racist practices, racist language, all this stuff. And now it's like, let's do something now. Let's ban him. I mean, great. He should be banned, but to do it now when there's legal history of Sterling doing things, like, you can't be serious.
So what Brooke is talking about when she talks about the legal stuff, actually, Bomani Jones from ESPN reported on this, I believe, in 2006. This guy has settled out of court because of racist practices as it relates to housing. So I think he had two cases against him, either probably in 2003 and 2006, to where he was trying or denying housing to African Americans and Hispanics in Koreatown, which is in LA. And there are reports, at least I heard on the radio, there are reports that in these documents, the court documents, that it says that Sterling made reference to African Americans as lazy and smelling and kind of stinking up his apartment complex, and that all they do is have babies and stuff like that. So Jones, like I said, reported back on this in 2006, and I hadn't heard about it, and it was just kind of brushed under the rug. And Brooke makes an excellent point. If this was known about this particular individual, he's known to, have racist practices or racist tendencies, why exactly had anybody addressed this issue in the past? And did people know and just not care about it because, he was throwing money at everybody? Or, like, it just kind of dawns on me now, and, seeing some of the details of the past history, like, this has been a problem for a long period of time, like Brooke mentioned.
But it hasn't been a problem for him. And in order for people to exist like that, you have to have people who are like you. So, and I think he even said it in the tape himself, you can't have these people around my friends. Yeah, because your friends are racist too. And so, and what is he? He's a millionaire, billionaire. So you have billionaire friends. Racist. Yeah. Okay. Well, none of this is shocking. None of this is absolutely shocking at all that this happens. And I feel like we live in a country that has historically has racist practices, institutionalized racism, and it is still in existence. And things have changed. People look at civil rights and, oh, we have a black president. But when you have situations like this, it should let you know that it's still absolutely prevalent. If a person, doesn't get an interview because of their name, different things like that, it's absolutely present in our country. And it's great that things like this will happen for people like Sterling, but at its most basic level, we need to start having conversations about race, about racism, about, how stereotypes, prejudices, all those things that I don't think we've ever done in this country. Nobody wants to talk about race. No one talks about racism, let me say that. No one wants to talk about that. It's like, oh, it's gone. Oh, it's not in existence. Oh, that's the past. Oh, slavery's over. All that stuff. But if you really want to have healing for a people, healing for a country, then you have to start basically with having these conversations that people don't want to have. And, excuse me, at the same time, it's hard for me to understand this, but I suspect that for racism has an impact on the oppressor just as well as on the oppressee, right?
How?
I mean, I just suspect it does.
What impact does racism have on the one who's the oppressor besides fat pockets?
I don't think it's just fat pockets, though. I think it, to a certain degree, there's a sense with racism is prejudice plus power, and you see that power is a lot of times connected with money.
Mm-hmm.
If not more than anything, it's connected with money. But with that prejudice and with all that is fear. And what does fear do for you? Like, take whole racism constant. What does fear do to you as a human?
I don't think all racism is predicated on fear, though. I think it's a lot of it is learned and passed down from generation to generation.
Absolutely. But what are you passing down? You're passing down this racism. You're passing down this prejudice. But you're passing down nonsense. Like, you're passing down a sense of fear as well. Hey, maybe it's not all like that. I definitely think it's learned behavior because race is a social construct. Anyway.
One thing that stands out to me for this particular situation, well, actually two things that stand out. First, this particular situation shows us, or at least shows me, that it's okay to be racist or have racist tendencies as long as you have enough money to cover your butt. Like I said, he had, cases against him where he, was, caught in racist or discriminatory housing practices. He settled out of court, I think, for undisclosed amount of money, but from my understanding, the judge said this is probably one of the biggest settlements as it relates to housing in the history of the United States. But because Sterling had money, he was still able to, go on as owner, and it's real problematic to where when you're rich, especially a billionaire. It just became okay for him to think that way, or people kind of just didn't really pay attention to it. The second thing that works along with that, or works in conjunction with that, is I question or wonder how many people actually know who they're working for and whether it matters once they're getting a paycheck. Now, we can't really know, if Doc Rivers or any of the Clippers players, like Chris Paul or Blake Griffin or anybody actually knew about this man's history. I mean, we personally won't know that. But do we actually do research in terms of, who we're working for? Do we put in the time and the effort to research our employers and research our history and look at news clippings in terms of how the people we work for handle business, especially with minorities? Or do we just seek a job and wait for the paycheck because we have to pay bills and put food on our table? And when we do that, will we actually just work for anybody despite their, poor practices?
Or sometimes just looking at a person, you don't have to do major research in Google. You can just look at your office or your cubicle sometimes. And does that matter?
How? What do you mean? Explain that.
I mean, like you're saying, do research, learn about, the company, learn about the person who you're working for. But I'm saying in your actual work environment, do you just pay attention to how people are being treated, what people are saying, things like that? And we're still talking about, racism.
Mm-hmm.
But do you pay attention to that stuff or just brush it off or, ignore it or say, I'm just going to focus on this thing over here and not worry about that?
So basically, once you're in, will you leave if stuff came
To light. Yeah.
to light?
Mm-hmm.
And then, to be perfectly honest, that's tough because if you have bills to pay, yeah, it becomes a tough situation whether or not you want to leave and stay. You may look for a job, in secret, and then kind of usher your way out.
Or you may not.
Or you may not. But again, these with the NBA players, these guys won't go without jobs, and they're already pretty rich as we see it anyway. Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, for people in positions of power, especially financial power, I think they could risk taking a stance, or they could have risked not playing a game. So it would have been interesting to see how it would have played out if the NBA didn't make a decision as quickly. But I guess we'll never know. There's arguments that the players should sat out, that throwing their jerseys or their warm-ups in the middle of the court was a weak protest. I believe it kind of was weak, but again, because time, the NBA took a very fast path in terms of coming up with a resolution. We'll never know whether or not the players would have responded in a more powerful way.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it raises the question, like, it's interesting because, when we talk about, make it spiritual, when we talk about spirituality a little bit, there's so many things that can kind of come up around things like this. Like, what are the implications for racism on your psyche and on your soul, right? And I'm not going to answer this, but just, questions to throw out there. One of my Facebook friends posted something like, take the plank, that scripture, and take the plank out of your own eye before you're trying to take the, I'm totally jacking this up.
Basically, judge yourself or look at yourself in the mirror before you look at somebody else. Yeah.
Stick stuff out of your eye. Just, yeah, that one. But yeah, and so kind of like when we look at a person who is doing wrong, racist, whatever, are we looking at ourselves as well in terms of the things that we do and say? So, and I think it's an interesting point. I don't think it's a strong point, but I think it's an interesting point. Or when we're looking at social justice, that I believe that's a spiritual concept, social justice, because I believe Jesus was really into that, caring for the poor, the oppressed, the widows. And so when we're looking at things like racism, are we shying away from that or going toward it? And, do we consider that a spiritual practice?
Yeah, I think ultimately going forward, we as minorities really have to figure out or have discussions about how we respond to things like this, because what I see is when we respond too aggressively, sometimes say people like we're crazy. So in the instance of Kanye West going on TV and saying, George Bush hates black people, some people within our own community flip out on Kanye and say, oh, he gets carried away, or he's too arrogant, or he's crazy, or that shouldn't have been in the forum. But then when we have the Clippers just wear black socks and turn their shirts inside out, well, we say that's too soft. So I think at a certain point, we know that these racism exists. We know that there are people out there who simply don't like people because of the shade of their skin or the race that they are.
And because they stereotype.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's a sense of, for this particular generation, I don't think there's a sense of how we go about handling social justice issues and how we go about performing activism for ourselves. I think sometimes we'll march, then we may not follow through, and I think we're just so far removed from the civil rights movement, and some of that stuff hasn't been passed down to this particular generation that we don't necessarily always know how to respond. And then when we do respond, there's often no follow up. So I think you know, looking at this and looking at past issues, I think we really have to realize or figure out how we go about handling social justice issues, and also how we move forward once we address it with a form of action, whether it's protest or demonstration.
And I think finally for me, whenever there's stuff like this that happens, it kind of bothers me that the the ones who are oppressed have to do the work. Because even when you say, what are we doing as, how are we looking at things and are we with our activism and stuff? Well, the problem is the oppressor. The problem is racism and white supremacy. But we have to do the work. But we ain't do nothing to begin with to even be looked at in that way. So the work has to be done on multiple levels. Not only for us as African Americans and people of color, but white people. You have to start talking to each other and checking each other. Like, it has to happen on that level too. Because like I said with Sterling, this ain't new. He's done this. He's documented that he's done this, which means he's not an island. He had a wife. He had friends. Like, not saying that they're racist. No, I'm not saying that. But people are aware, and likely plenty of them were racist. I'm not gonna, I don't know who, but birds of a feather, right? Together. So you like that. So it has to also take place on those levels as well. Every group has to look at how they're playing a role in this. And granted, some groups might not want to because you don't think it's a problem because you're perpetuating the problem. But yeah, things, it has to be multiple. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Well, this was our discussion. We wanted to stay up to date with current topics. So we want to hear what you think about this particular issue. Do you think the NBA made a swift decision? Do you think the players should have done anything else in demonstration? Do you think it was even worth it at this point? I mean, the guy's already a billionaire. This is probably not going to hurt his pockets too much. What are your ideas about this particular topic? We want you to comment below.
And I'm sorry, what do you think about your role with social justice? What do you think about the implications for racism on, our souls and our psyches? What do you think about that? Like, because it's both. It's the practical, it's the social, but also it's the spiritual. It's the spiritual as well.
So comment below. I am Mr. Terrell Harris, and this is Atlanta Brooke on Twitter. Go to the open box so you can comment on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe and click the like button. Peace.